Hi, I'm Lori Jones, President and CEO of Avasec Communications and host of StrategyCast. Join me and my guests, innovators, disruptors, and visionaries, as we explore bold and brave marketing strategies that help you transform, scale, and grow your brand. I'm thrilled to have my friend Achim Klor back on the show. Now a consultant at Core Consulting, Achim is here to share his deep expertise on market positioning and mastering your audience's rhythms. In this episode, you'll learn how to avoid common pitfalls in marketing leadership and get practical, actionable insights you can apply right away. We'll also break down the successful B2B campaigns like BASF's, so you can see how these strategies work in the real world. If you're looking for smart long-term approaches to grow your business, this is an episode for you. And don't forget to check out the most recent issue of the StrategyCast newsletter on StrategyCast.com. Just like this episode, it's full of inspiration and a ton of ideas that will elevate your strategies and marketing know-how.
A competitive edge starts with strategy, and strategy starts with knowing how to develop one. StrategyCast is a leading marketing podcast that serves up strategic insights, trends, and tips to help separate your business from the pack. Tune in weekly as host Lori Jones interviews bold marketing leaders who have priceless wisdom and are willing to share. Each episode explores cutting-edge approaches that have proven instrumental in transforming brands into industry trailblazers.
Welcome to StrategyCast. I am so excited to have Achim Klor join the show again for his encore interview. You're just such a smart dude. It's so nice to have you on the show. Always welcome.
Thanks, Lori. I'm blessed to be back, and thank you for having me back.
So we have become kind of kindred spirits. For like since the first interview that we did with you. We just banter back and forth on LinkedIn. You've got so much wisdom in that strategic mind of yours. Before we dive into an incredible topic today, which is going to be positioning and messaging in B2B tech, the cause and effect of successful campaigns. Before we get there, tell us a little bit more about your journey. It's changed a little bit since we last chatted.
Yeah, for sure. I'm at that point in my life where in marketing, most of the time, the younger folk are the ones that are coming up the ranks and stuff. And the last place that I was at, I put them on their course. And typically, there's a like anything in marketing, there is a time where you have to leave, right? So typical tenure of a CMO or a director of marketing or head of marketing is roughly 26 months, and that 26 months came along, and that was my time to go. So, and since then I've been consulting. I thought, well, you know what, rather than trying to find another job that will put me in the same spot, I'm at the point in my life, I'm going to be 60 next year, where I'm going to focus more on sharing what I know, helping the young folks that are coming into this industry, hopefully share my thoughts, share my experience, share my wisdom that I've collected over the years. Not that I'm saying that I'm anything wise or not, but I do have something to share, and I think there is something to learn from the 30 years that I've been in this business.
Yeah. I just have to respond quickly before we dive in regarding the tenure of marketing. It's not the marketers, the CMOs causing that. It's the lack of CEO leadership or big changes that happen in the investment community that don't give marketing, communications, strategy the lift that it needs. They haven't budgeted correctly. They're not giving the campaign enough time to settle in and succeed. Product isn't working, and they refuse to acknowledge that. There's always a reason. Rarely it's because the marketer hasn't done a good job.
Yeah, you know what? I've been on both sides of the fence, Lori, and I will say this from my own experience. I have been on the side where, maybe I haven't led the marketing in the right way, especially early in my career, and that's just part of learning.
Yeah.
But later, you're right. And the biggest reason for that is what's something called marketing time lag. And that's a lot of the C-suite can't wrap its head around the fact that sales-led initiatives are linear multipliers to the revenue, whereas marketing is a non-linear multiplier. There's a lot going on that is impacting when and how quote unquote ROI is measured against marketing, which is not it's not the same measurement that you can put towards product or sales, right? So there's an education that has to happen there. The other thing too is, and I'm glad you said this because this is spot on. It's a lot has to also do with the fact that when the C-suite, especially the CEO, is out looking for financing, they're making promises they can't keep.
Wow.
And when they come back, they expect their team to make good on the promises that they just made that they really can't keep. So there's a lot of pressure on marketing to force say a 26, 36 month window into 12 months. And that's just not realistic.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, I think it's important that we state that because we've seen it happen to ourselves. It's happened to friends. And I think it's a real miss today in business in general and decision within the C-suite. So one thing that you and I love, we write about this a lot, is positioning and messaging. I think of all the different strategies out there that can make or break a brand, make or break a campaign, a launch, whatever it might be, is the positioning. And then the messaging that really is the underpin to that positioning. So today, like I said, we're going to talk about the cause and effect of successful campaigns. One thing that you and I both agree on is that asking better questions up front when more leads are needed just isn't necessarily deployed the way it should be.
Yep, 100%. The number one cause of that is lack of insight. And insight is everything in marketing. The better the insight, the better the outcomes. If again, talking about cause and effect, if you go back far enough to why things aren't working, messaging, creative, especially on the tactical side, which is where most of us run to. But if you look at why things aren't working, if you go back to the cause of that, you go back far enough, it always comes back to a lack of insight. And so this is why I preach all the time, and it's not just me. There's lots of people on LinkedIn that, especially a lot of experts right now on LinkedIn that are beating this drum, which I'm thankful for. And that is like, you got to get down to the nuts and bolts of why people are going to want your stuff. And the only way you can do that is by asking them and by looking at the market, the competition, and how what they're telling you fits into what you're trying to make in the market that you're making it for. And so, one thing I learned at my Alt MBA back, this is 2016 now, Alt MBA number 3, and it stuck with me ever since, is something that Seth Godin always talks about. It's like, you always ask who this is for and what it's for, right? And a lot of times we get so married into what we're doing on the tactical side, we don't want to give it up because we're so in love with it. And it's the same with the love of product, right? You hear product teams always saying, like, our product is so good, it'll sell itself. It's not necessarily true. And so getting back to what you're saying is, you go back far enough, it is always rooted in a lack of insight.
Yeah, I agree. And insight leads to strategy.
100%.
And so without that, teams are just going to market with messaging perhaps that isn't meaningful to the audience. It may be unclear. We see a lot of inconsistency in the market regarding messaging as well. And at the end of the day, that just confuses potential audience or buyers.
Yeah, your plan, your strategic plan, your go-to-market plan, if it's not rooted in like sound insight, you're already flying blind. You're already shooting darts in the dark, right? And the outcome isn't great.
Yeah.
Right. That's why there's so many tech companies that don't differentiate. There's a great infographic from Map and Fire. The fellow's name is Clay. Oh gosh, I'm gonna have a brain fart. Sorry, Clay, I forgot your last name. But anyway, it's a great. But he does a great synopsis of why and how many companies that don't differentiate. There's like 67, like 2/3 of B2B tech companies have like little to no differentiation. It's because they're copying everybody. They're copying each other, right? And that's their strategy. And look, I get it. As a startup, you do what you got to do to get going. That's fine. Everybody does that. That's natural. But there is a time where you have to stop and look and go, okay, now how do we take this to the next level? Right? We can't keep doing the copying and pasting thing. We got to start doing our own thing.
Well, and there's positioning, I think, is where most of the mistakes happen, because they don't have a market position. They don't have anything to own, anything to create distinction. And we study a lot of positioning strategies at the agency, and have a big list of different approaches. And Tesla, like, one approach is a disruptive positioning strategy. Tesla is a great example of that. That type of positioning requires very, very high level conceptual thinking, and really a first-class execution. It goes against, disruptive brands, and there's a lot, let's face facts, in B2B tech, go against industry norms. And that is how ultimately they create that disruption. But in a lot of these situations, most not even a large percentage, many CEOs feel that the product is so good that it's going to sell itself. And again, back to, if it's unclear, if it's inconsistent, if it's self-serving, if it's not really meaningful to the audience, it's not going to make an impact at all, and you won't achieve your goals.
100%. And that mindset comes from a misquote from Peter Drucker. But what Peter Drucker actually said is, when you know your customer so well, the product will end up selling itself. But the context around the customer is what's left out.
Right.
And that is customer research. That is insight.
Exactly. And when you know them that well, then the go-to-market strategy is something completely different than if you are, if you've got missionary work or competitive intercept or something like that, that needs to take place. I think another area that ties into asking better questions is understanding if there's a revenue issue.
Yes. And, when there's revenue issues, again, this is where marketing timeline has to be if there's any one thing that an up-and-coming marketing leader can take away from this discussion is educate your leadership team on marketing timeline, because the expectations we have don't align, especially when it comes to what we expect marketing to do and how quickly we'll want the results. Typically, it's within 2 to 4 weeks, and that's just not realistic. In B2B, especially, gosh, the bigger the ticket item is, like an enterprise, you're looking at years instead of months before anything happens. I mean, B2B Tech Institute just published this a few years ago, and the average tech purchase is every 4 years, right? So if you missed that particular procurement schedule on that particular client that you're after, well, you've got another 3 or 4 years you have to wait to get back on their shortlist.
Yeah. One thing I love, and I'm actually looking up something that I want to share while we're talking about this next section, and it's not coming up for me. But one thing that you and I both agree on as well is that people don't necessarily understand what the true business issue is that they're solving.
Right. Yeah. And again, that gets right back to insight again, right? Where when you know who your customers are intimately, and you know what their pain points are intimately, and you're following up with them regularly, because things change. And let's be honest, the what you hear from your customer today may not be the same thing you hear from your customer tomorrow. So this is why we have to constantly be in communication with them. And the other thing too is, especially surveys are okay, but it's better to have conversations like this.
Yeah.
Because surveys, a lot of people lie in surveys, right? But to get back to what you're saying about revenue and accountability, if you've got that documented, you have your customer's ideal profile, your audience profile. A lot of times we don't think of the audience that we're actually selling to, right? Procurement teams aren't usually one person. It's usually multiple people, right? And what does that audience makeup look like? Who's the champion on that procurement team, right? Knowing what that is intimately, knowing what their pain points are, and also what their motivations and their fears are is absolutely critical to crafting the right messages, being unique in your positioning, what April Dunford calls differentiated positioning, and differentiated value. And knowing that, having that documented is absolutely critical for everybody on the team, especially the leadership team, so they understand, okay, this is who we are, this is what we're in, and this is why we're doing it for these people, right? We're actually helping them. We're serving these people. We're helping them get something that'll help them do their jobs better.
Yeah. And those insights, I think, make a huge difference. So we're talking about really understanding what the business issues are. You've talked about, revenue, which is the effect of a lot of it, but sometimes it's just, could be at the front end of the issue as well. You've talked about understanding the customer. What about, a brand image? What about awareness? What about price? What about, ROI in general? What about targets and goals? We've talked about that. Seasonality, new products, cash flow, competition. We've got this list of, of about 35 different business issues that we review with our clients before each contract begins, and a lot of times before each year or each campaign, because they fluctuate, so that we fully understand what the issue is that we're solving. And by the way, listeners, if you'd like me to send you that list, email me at Lori@StrategyCast.com and I'll be happy to. But uncovering that and understanding it, I think, is half the battle, so that we're all working, down the same path.
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly. And so setting the expectations up front is really, really critical. Helping, marketing leadership needs to lead marketing. So rather than taking orders from sales-led and product-led initiatives, take the leadership role and say, okay, I hear you and I get you need leads now. So let's do some sales activation. But at the same time, we need to build our brand reputation. Because if we're not on the short list, it's going to take time to get on the short list. And the only way you can get on their short list is through awareness, confidence, and trust. That's brand reputation, right? And if you don't invest in that, and we're always stuck in sales activation or lead gen and demand gen, we're not going to grow. We're not going to scale. We can't scale when we're stuck in that loop.
I think that is 9 out of 10 times the issue that brands have with scaling, is that their marketing is stuck mid-funnel, because that's where they had to start, because the budgets have not been in place and the time has not been in place to build the awareness top of funnel. And it's just not going to work.
No, because look, I mean, we all know that, 5 out of 100, or let's say 95 out of 100 people, buyers aren't ready to buy.
Yeah.
Right. And the 5 who are, half of those deals end in no decision.
Yeah.
Right. Why do half of those deals end in no decision? Well, typically it's the status quo. But most of the time, if you read the Jolt Effect or the Challenger sale from, for some reason, I'm always losing my authors here. Anyway, but if you read those books, you'll know it's because fear of screwing up is a huge deal, especially in B2B tech companies where you're buying big ticket items, right? I've been on that side where I've made the wrong choice based on a recommendation from a peer, and it cost me my job, right? So I know what that's like. That fear is real, because the next time I was in that decision making, I was like, I don't want any part of this.
Yeah.
Because I know if I screw up again, I'm out the door again, right?
Well, and in that situation, by the way, the Jolt Effect, Dixon Matthews
McKenna,
by the way. But that's where I think a lot of people, I don't want to be, have a negative show here. But that's
Yes.
where I think a lot of marketers are set up to fail. And it's recognizing that, and it's having the strength and the business savvy to say, we have a business issue here that has been negatively affected, that is negatively affecting marketing. And those are bold conversations that people need to have. One of our VP, Dave Smith at the agency, he loves to tell this story. We had a credible client for many years, and the CEO sat in our conference room, which is, I'm pointing, it's just directly across from me, and he said, "What is the single reason that could cause this not to work?" And I said, "You don't listen to me." And it sounds egotistical, but I've seen it a million different times where, we're going off on all these tangents and marketing is sitting back saying, it's not going to work. And it's not going to work because we don't have the awareness that we need, because we have a negative reputation that we've got to rebuild, back to the business issues at hand that need to be solved. And that to me, those are great conversations to have with people. And he repeated it and took it to heart. And we had such great business discussions after that instead of tactical marketing.
Oh, absolutely. And sometimes you just have to be blunt.
Yeah.
Because leaders need to just hear the truth,
Yeah.
right? And this is where marketing needs to step up in leadership, I believe, because I've walked that walk as well, where I didn't lead when I should have, and I know what that's like. So I'm just as guilty. So, but what I can say is, like, when you do step up and lead and you do the right thing,
Yeah.
then it will always work out. Now, the ones that don't want to listen to you, they'll still show you the door. That's fine. Then that's not a good fit. But the ones who actually want to grow, that actually want to learn, they will listen.
Yeah.
Case in point, I've also have been in those situations just like yourself where they end up listening to you and then you see them explode. And then that's gratifying to see actually a company go from not being on the short list, having no awareness, to then building that up over time.
Yeah.
And then kaboom. I mean, Monday.com is a really good example of that, by the way. The first 3 years they were trying to find their way, and then the next 6 years they went on this massive rampage. And look at them now; they're competing with all the big names like Asana and that, right? So, and HubSpot now. So,
oh yeah, and which is such a great important point regarding marketing time lag, and the fact that you've got to invest in mistakes in order to get to where your right fit is going to be. Marketing, there are certain pieces of marketing that are scientific, a lot of the data, but a lot of it is all in great insights that lead to strategy. We've talked about a lot of this, but a lot of it's trial and error.
sure.
Figure out what it will take to get the audience to move. Along with that is truly the time lag, the addressing that, and the fact that out of the chute, most brands don't have a gazillion dollars to reduce a brand, understanding, which, can take place, in the marketplace anywhere between 2 and 5 years. If you want to reduce that, guess what it's going to take? It's going to take a ton of money to make that happen. So knowing that most brands don't have that kind of money, and that it takes time to build the brand, and that we're overshooting goals, what advice do you have for our audience around having those discussions with the C-suite and really reconciling what can actually happen?
My number one piece of advice is invest in your lead generation and your product as you would your marketing.
Yeah.
And your brand, especially your brand. With you, and I wouldn't say balance, because balance is not the right word, but if you mesh your marketing strategy with lead gen / demand gen and brand building at the same time, you will set yourself up. Your future self will love you and be thankful. It will, 100%. And it works every single time. If we're stuck in like, and I think you said this earlier, if we're stuck into the lead gen, demand gen loop, we're stuck. We can't grow because we're all, and it takes so much effort to do those kinds of tactics and constantly recycle it, right? Because it's a grind.
Yeah.
But when you marry that with brand building, I'll guarantee you 2-3 years from now, your sales team will have the air cover they need to get on the short list. So my piece of advice for anybody listening is make sure that you talk to your leadership team about this. Make sure they understand marketing time lag. Make sure they understand the tremendous value in building brand, investing in brand, right? It's not some hokey pokey arts and craft thing. It's it's real economic business. I'll give you an idea, and I'll tell you what Warren Buffett said this, that the brand is the economic moat of the business. Now, this is Warren Buffett.
Yeah.
The guy who runs Berkshire, this is the guy who bought Duracell. This is he knows what he's talking about.
Yeah.
Right? He calls the brand the economic moat. This isn't the thing that supports your business. This is the thing that defends your business. It protects and defends who you are, right? You got to invest in that. If all you're thinking about is sales and leads and demand, you're already losing because everyone else is doing that, right?
Well, and brand building is not easy.
No.
But back to what the show episode is about today, it's about developing positioning strategies that lead to differentiation, that lead to distinction through smart marketing and an integrated execution that takes care of everything from the top of the funnel, at least, through mid or lower. And that takes very, very smart approaches. And approaches that seemingly might be counterintuitive, like out of home to a B2B tech brand.
Yeah, for sure. The walk away here is, again, it gets back to cause and effect. Make sure that you've got sound insight. And that's two things. That's your customers, that's your market competition, but also your data. If you have historical data, fantastic. If you can get into things like predictive and causal analytics, that's even better. But your data is going to help you formulate what that strategy should be, as much as your customer feedback is, as much as your competitive landscape does, right? So those things are super important because that ends up building the strategy to go to market. It ends up building your brand over time, right? Yep. Because those insights is the solid foundation. This is the rocks that's holding up your dream house, right? If your dream house is a house of cards, doesn't matter how pretty it is, it's still a house of cards. One gust of wind, it's coming down, right? You want solid rocks holding up your dream home.
And you provided such a great example with Monday and what they've been able to do to really combat and create growth through smart positioning and messaging. One of the other examples I love in the market, we've talked about it for years and years and years, is BASF.
Oh yeah, great stuff.
Yeah,
yeah. They were setting a real like a complete different tone back in this is going back to 2010, 2011, 2012. Their campaigns. SAP was another one that was doing a great job then as well. Those two B2B brands come to mind as changing the game for sure.
Yeah. BASF is one of those examples of a campaign that just took smart positioning, around, they don't make the product. They just make the product you're using better from a messaging standpoint, that just created such strength with very few words around something that would be intriguing to an audience and say, I better take a look. And that sort of direct approach with almost reverse engineering a message in the mindset of an audience that says they're the ingredient for all from a chemistry standpoint, says a lot from a strength standpoint in the market.
Yes, and that particular campaign, which is probably coming up to 10 years old now, still
Got it.
resonates because of the fact that it was such a unique take on positioning a brand in the B2B space, especially an enterprise space.
Yeah.
When you think of chemical brands and then you hear something like that, it just throws you for a loop because you're not expecting it, right? And it was so powerful at that time. I remember using that as a case study many times in pitches.
Yep. We have two, as a matter of fact. Those are fun pitches, aren't they?
Yeah.
So really the foundation of success here is insight and research.
I'm a big advocate of everything starts with insight.
Yeah.
Right. Insight, the better the insight, the better the outcomes. You're not going to struggle if you invest in insight. Your brand will get stronger. Your campaigns will get stronger. It doesn't shorten the timeline. Let's be very clear about something here. It does not shorten the time lag because time lag is not in our control.
Right.
Time lag is in the market's control. Just because we can turn on a dime doesn't mean the market can or even will, right? We have to accept that. And we like B2B marketing, B2B is a marathon. It's not a sprint. You have to run 26 miles to finish a marathon. You can't run 1, 2, or 10 and then say, I'm done. You didn't finish, right? So you've got to understand that you're in it for the long haul, right? That's what this is. And, getting back to what we talked about earlier, give your marketing leaders the time they need to help you get the ROI you will eventually get, right? Because again, sales is a linear multiplier. You can plan that very, very, very almost in a compartment method, whereas marketing is not linear, and there's so many things that impact it over time.
Yeah. We've talked about positioning and laser focusing on the best fit customers, and that there's a tendency to try to be all things to all people, and the fact that uniqueness truly does matter there. We've talked about from a messaging standpoint that clarity is essential. That clear and concise, customer focused again. From a creative standpoint, I think there are many executions out there that don't necessarily communicate. It might be a pretty ad, but pretty doesn't sell at the end of the day. It needs to stop someone. The aesthetics need to be there, but the communication within the confines of the aesthetics is really not deployed the way it should be quite often.
Yeah, and you know what? I again, early in my career, I was guilty of this as well, and I think it's just something you have to learn. And the hard truth that I got handed to me early in my career was from my very first creative director, Gordon Pritchard, and I remember he saying to me, look, we're not here to creatively, and I'm sorry, I'm going to be blunt and a little off color here, but this is what he told me. He said, we're not here to creatively masturbate. We're here to communicate. Yeah. So stop the decoration and start the communication, right? And a lot of times creative people treat their design as an art project, and that's not what it is.
Yeah, I agree.
Art is something you admire in a gallery, in your home. It means something to you. It might not mean the same thing to me. It's subjective, right? Whereas creative marketing design is all about communicating something of value. And David Ogilvy said this. He says, if it doesn't sell, it is not creative.
I agree with that 100%. My father repeated that quote. By the way, Ogilvy was the first advertising book I read.
Oh, yeah.
Dive in. I was a broadcast journalism major. I really needed, with the exception of having my father by my side who taught me so much, I really needed to understand more of, advertising mix at the time. We call it integrated today, but and Ogilvy was that first that book. And I remember, if it doesn't sell, it isn't creative. Time and time again in meetings, that phrase being repeated through my father, who was a creative director. And it's just, the tendency is there to spend too much on creative, to overshoot the simplicity of what's needed with complicated graphics and messaging, which isn't going to stop people in 2 to 3 to 6 seconds, which is what we need.
Absolutely. And sometimes those messages are so simple. They look to a creative person as boring.
Yeah.
But again, it's not about that. It's about how to be effective, right? And effective marketing sometimes just is what I always say, less is more, right? You don't need to overdo it. Just a lot of times you just need to remove stuff.
Wrap us up. Don't wrap us up. Wrap this up today. We've talked about asking better questions, understanding the true business issues, using insight and research, focus on clear positioning, messaging, and creative execution. That is a game changer if really deployed the way it should be for most brands.
Absolutely, yes. And again, I'm going to just keep beating this drum is, to get that going, start talking to your customers. Just start having conversations with them and try to do it regularly. Don't just do it once and then think it's done. It's not customer research is not a one and done thing. Marketing is not a one and done thing. And again, if you think about what marketing actually is, marketing is all about people.
Yeah.
Right? It's all about communicating value to people.
And understand your behaviors so that you are communicating at the right place, the right time, the right, message so that it resonates.
Exactly. And the more conversations that we have with our customers and the research we do with our competitors and the marketplace, the stronger our brand gets and the better and the stronger our reputation gets, which ultimately helps us win future deals, which is what we want. I know we want it now. Everybody wants things now. Like every CEO wants, the leads now. Every sales VP wants the close deals now. I get that. I understand. But you need to have patience in this line of work to make it work tomorrow. You have to.
And that's a beautiful close. What is the best way for our audience to get in contact with you?
Oh, I just go to my website, klorconsulting.com. Happy to have a chat. I'm always open to, a good chinwag like this. I'm on LinkedIn as well. Look me up, hook me up. If you want to connect, happy to. I have a weekly newsletter that I call Achim's Razor that comes out every Tuesday. Feel free to browse and comment and share and criticize, critique it, whatever. I'm open.
Yeah, incredible insights in that LinkedIn newsletter. I regularly read it, as does my entire team. So thank you for that gift as well.
Thank you. Yeah.
And if you'd like to get in contact with me, you can email me, Lori@StrategyCast.com. And don't forget to sign up for the StrategyCast newsletter at StrategyCast.com as well. That's a mouthful today. Achim, thank you so much for your appearance, your second appearance on.
Yes, thank you. Having you back.
I tell you, it's worth it.
We'll do it again.
Yes, we will.
That's a wrap. Thanks for joining us on today's show. We hope your strategic brains are spinning with new ideas and bold inspiration that will elevate your strategies and marketing know-how.